At the Australian International Music Show, and we're catching up with Robben Ford. Good to have you down the country again.
Thank you. Nice to be here, always.
And what a career, what a history you've had over the years. Do we take it right back to Charlie Musselwhite? Is that where we begin, or does it go even before that?
Well, that was my first kind of high visibility professional, gig outside of working with my own groups in my hometown and a little bit in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, locally. So Charlie was the first guy who hired me,
So would you consider that the big break?
It certainly was a break. I mean, it was an experience. Nothing came of that. It didn't lead to other opportunities, particularly playing with Charlie. Not that it couldn't have, but, at that time, I was 18 when I played with Charlie. I think I had my 19th birthday with Charlie. And, then I went back to the same old thing for about a year until I worked with Jimmy Witherspoon. Jimmy Witherspoon was a much more high visibility gig for me. It led to, other, large, venues, a couple of festivals that I did, and I got some notoriety that way, and people started hearing and talking about me. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a big tour that you did in the early 70s with George Harrison. That must have been an incredible experience for you as well.
Well, it certainly was unexpected and a great opportunity for a 22-year-old kid. So, yeah.
Were you a Beatle fan at that point? I guess.
Well, I certainly had been a Beatle fan.
Yeah.
By that time I was a little bit of a jazz and blues snob, and I was less impressed with the world of rock and roll. Personally, to me, musically, rock and roll was kind of lowbrow. But I was in tremendous company. Willie Weeks was on bass, and Billy Preston was on keyboards, and Andy Newmark, and the other drummers, I can't think of his name right now, but it was an amazing group, and Ravi Shankar and a 16-piece Indian orchestra. So, it was an incredible experience to be around these amazing musicians, and to spend time with George Harrison.
Because I would imagine you would have been performing Beatles songs that George had written back then.
Well, yeah, we were doing things from All Things Must Pass, and he did some cover things a little bit. We did a John Lennon tune, I remember, and we did Nina Simone's version of a George Harrison song. Yeah, it was wild,
Yeah.
And his album at the time was Dark Horse.
Right.
So it was the Dark Horse tour.
And Joni Mitchell is another name. I could name drop through this interview all the way through, couldn't I?
Yeah.
Considering your career. How was the Joni
extent.
Mitchell? I guess both as a live band and a recording band.
Well, Joni Mitchell, just in herself. In my opinion, the greatest artist of the 20th century, to me, just in terms of the range of her talent. Her songwriting abilities, they were off the chart, by any other songwriter's standards. An amazing voice and a fine musician, So that's still my favorite experience I've ever had in my life. Was that first year I worked with Joni Mitchell was just beautiful. She was at her prime, in every level. The record was Court and Spark, and I recorded with her a live album out of that tour. And then Miles of Isles, and I played on, I think, 4 songs on Hissing of Summer Lawns. Which was my real studio experience with her. A little bit of other recording with her that was never released.
Yeah.
And 2 years of touring with her, and the band was the LA Express. So that was, that 2 years I learned more about music than at any other period in my life.
So this was really your apprenticeship, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. With one of the greatest artists of our time, you know. So it was kind of special.
Yeah. So applying that then to yourself as a solo performer, you know, would you have been able to have the career that you have now had you not gone through that learning experience with all of those great people back then?
It would have been very different, you know. I mean, all I can say is it would have been very different. I was quite snobbish about music, you know, when I was a young man. And, I mean, I was quite young when I played with them, and they kind of broke that up a little bit for me, you know. They opened up my mind to all kinds of music. I don't know what would have happened without that experience. It's really hard to say. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
So then I guess the student becomes the teacher. You come down to Australia, the Australian International Music Show, and the workshops you've been doing in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane.
Yeah.
You know, from what you've learned from other people, I guess this is a chance to pass on
Yes.
what you have learned to other people now.
It is, and I try to do exactly that. I mean, I don't hold back. I don't, you know, hide anything from anyone. In fact, I try to include, you know, exposing my weaknesses so that people realize, you know, even their heroes they're just people, and that, you know, you too can find your own, you know, inner voice and your own inner music, and it's not really about competing with others or trying to reach so-and-so's level. You know, that stuff it's okay when you're a kid, you know, because it inspires you to you know, work hard for a while, but, you know, eventually you want to really kind of let go of all of that and start just really exploring what is naturally inside of you, what's naturally, you know, your body is more attuned to certain things than other people. You know, some people are just naturally quicker, but that doesn't mean you're not a musician. If you're naturally slower, you're just a different kind of musician who's capable of other things that someone who's a quick musician would never even dream of. So,
yeah, I guess you know, a couple of years on the road with Joni, with George, you learn a lot over a long period of time. How do you summarise that down into an hour of a workshop?
well, you don't.
So, what's the main question when students meet you? What do they want to know from Robben Ford?
There's all kinds of questions. There's no main question.
Yeah.
No.
What's your main message to them?
What we just said.
Yeah.
That's it.
Be yourself.
Yeah, to learn to find the music that's within you, you know. One little tip I have for guitar players that I always try to encourage, you know, guitar players, is to learn chords. Because that unlocks all the music. You know, if you know chords, then you're not, you know, thrown when you hear that chord in somebody else's music. You know what's happening, you know. And you can play songs if you know chords, you know. But if you spend your time just as a soloist, which I did for many years, and I say many, I mean, you know, like I started playing the guitar at age 13, and, you know, I would say up until about age 18, I was really just a note guy, you know, basic chords, but I was really into soloing. And I started learning chords about 18, 19. That period I was with Charlie Musselwhite, I started using it. And you know, by the time I was playing with Joni Mitchell, the LA Express again was the group. Before that, Jimmy Witherspoon, blues singer. You know, I knew jazz chords, I knew jazz voicings, I knew how to use them, you know. And that was the key, you know, to playing with other people, was knowing chords, man, you know, and how they function, how they relate to each other.
Yeah. Who out of the new crop of artists that you see coming through would you see as passing the torch to?
I am kind of unaware of who's out there, I have to admit. I don't really pay attention, particularly to guitar players. I don't even want to know. Because, you know, if you listen to guitar players, you know, then you start to sound like them, you know, so... Gosh, I can't think of any young people who that I'm aware of. I know they're there, you know. But to me, you know, there's a little bit of too much, you know. I mean, especially amongst the young, you expect it and you want it, that they're into technique, you know. I mean, that's very important. But at a certain point, I don't really care, you know, how well you play. What I want to hear is something new, you know, something original, something different. And you know, they're out there. I know they're out there. There's some people out there, but you know, I'm a bit of an old dog in that, you know, I'm not impressed. I'm just not impressed. I don't care even.
Yeah.
But it's like if you have something to say, you know, if you have a beautiful song, or if you can play a melody beautifully, now I'm impressed. Now I'm like, wow, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're hearing it there from one of the world's great guitar players, Robben Ford. Good to have you down in Australia.
Oh, thank you.
At the Australian International Music Show.
Cheers.